And welcome into the Paul Farrington Show, a Packers instant hire reaction show here. Paul Farrington joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler at the University of Virginia. I know it looks a little bit weird right now, my setup, and that's actually because I'm in Lake Tahoe with some friends for the week. Between the NFC AFC Championship games and the Super Bowl, that first week off, I like to take some time before the Super Bowl because it gets busy again next week. So apologies for the lack of content that we've had coming out, but we'll have a lot more next week.
I wasn't really expecting any big news to drop when you said you'd be gone, but then the Packers come out and hire a defensive coordinator, and the fans know we got to cover that.
Oh, it's crazy. You know what's horrible, Ziggy, is I'm at the point now where I'm coming off the mountain, bad skier. All I try and do is hope to not get injured. So I'm coming off the mountain, luckily no injuries, and all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up from people saying, you see the news? I'm like, what the hell's going on here? It's almost a shame that it's gotten to this point where the Packers hiring a defensive coordinator now blows up my phone with different people. Just the link to the Packers continues to grow stronger. It's absolutely soul crushing to see it. But at the same time, it is important news to react to because this is a team that was on the precipice of getting to the NFC Championship game this year. And they were led by a very strong offense. So the defense the whole year and really all of Joe Barry's time in Green Bay had concerns. So this hire was extremely important for a Super Bowl hopeful next year. And at first glance, you see Jeff Hafley from Boston College, and you go, what? What happened to Ejiro Evero? And what happened to Jim Leonard and potentially Mike Zimmer? Who the hell is Jeff Hafley? He sounds like we said Greg Heffley from Diary of a Wimpy Kid. But the more we look into this, the more that, right before we started, Ziggy, my honest reaction was, oh, shit, I kind of like this hire. And you do too, right?
Yeah, I mean, everywhere he goes, he's got a wide variety of experience across college, across the NFL. And we'll talk a little bit later about what this might mean for the college football landscape. But for now, I mean, everywhere the guy goes, they immediately turn the defense around and have huge success.
So right before we started, Ziggy started rattling off some of the stats about Jeff Hafley. And, because, a lot of people don't know too much about this guy. He's the head coach at Boston College. Boston College football isn't exactly the place that we're all turning our attention to on Saturday afternoons. But when you go down and look at his past, like Ziggy said just now, 2014, 2015, he's the Browns defensive backs coach under Mike Pettin. A similarity there as Pettin was the first defensive coordinator that Matt LaFleur had in Green Bay. Listen to these numbers. Second season in Cleveland before he left. Number 1 in opponent passer rating. Number 1 in completion percentage. Number 1 in passes defensed. Number 2 in interceptions. It's all in Cleveland. Then he goes over to San Francisco, 2016, 2018. What did he do there? Well, he took the 27th passing defense in the league, moved them up to 11th. Everywhere he's gone in the NFL, instant success. He then goes over to college, at Ohio State, 2019, as the co-defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach. Number 1 defense in college football. Then he gets to Boston College. We'll talk about that in a second. But Ziggy, when you talk about the Green Bay Packers, and the numbers that they put up this year on the defensive side of the ball, it was not pretty. Someone who can come in and make an instant impact the way Hafley has everywhere he's been has to have you drooling with excitement, wouldn't it?
No, I mean, there's no question, right? The Packers had 6 interceptions this year. And I get that, the run defense was bad, but there were so many problems with this defense that bringing in a guy who has the possibility to completely fix the defensive backs, fix the passing game, put in a functional run defense, get some turnovers, right? As you said, they were known for that when he was there in Cleveland. Like a guy who everywhere he goes, players immediately like him, one of the best recruiters in college football. They connect with him. They start playing hard. They get the turnovers. They limit the big plays. Like those are all things the Packers were looking for this season, right? You could just, if you watch the game of a Packers fan, more likely than not, 1 in every 3 games on average, you're getting a single interception. It's just ridiculous.
Was it 6 on the season? 6 in total?
Yeah, it was 6 interceptions.
Didn't Deron Bland had more interception return touchdowns? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was ridiculous.
It's the Packers defense, just for some of the numbers, if you want to know them. 22nd in yards per attempt allowed, 16th in completion percentage, 31st in interceptions, 28th in first down percentage allowed, but 11th in passing yards total. But that's partially because the run defense was so bad. There were times, think back to these games, guys. Baker Mayfield threw for 350 yards. Bryce Young had a career day against you. I keep going back to this Tommy DeVito game where Tommy DeVito looked horrible against the Saints. He looked horrible against everyone else. And he looked good against the Packers. He went on a game-winning drive, made it look effortless. So you had all of these concerning games throughout the season. Now to bring in a guy, and that's the most important thing you said, Ziggy, was the stability and that people like him. Because Packers fans could be disappointed that they didn't go after someone like a Mike Zimmer or that personality type. But that's a combative personality. You want someone who gels well with this team. Matt LaFleur likes this guy. Now, you could say you also like Joe Barry, but were the accolades the same? Not exactly. Let's look a little bit at what he did at Boston College. In 4 years there, a 22-26 record. That doesn't jump off the page. But again, remember, the talent level of Boston College is not the same as if he were coaching at Alabama. If he was coaching, think about what he did when he was at Ohio State. Think about that defense. Just a couple things that were impressive to me here. Top 3 recruiting classes in the history of BC, all under Jeff Hafley. I keep waiting to say Greg Hafley now that that's in my mind. The past 3 Boston College coaches, they have failed to win 9 games in a season. Last one was in 2008. Jeff Hafley has done that. 2022, first win over an AP ranked team since 2014. They upset number 16 NC State. And their first bowl win since 2016. So you might sit back and go, Boston College, who the hell cares? He was successful even at Boston College. The more I look at this, the more I like it.
Yeah, I mean, boy, I don't want to be sitting here praising the Packers defensive coordinator hire, right? In a certain way, as you say, I'd rather they go out and get someone like Mike Zimmer, who has like the older scheme that wasn't looking super good, who's super combative. A guy like Brandon Staley, you don't know exactly what he's going to pull out. He's only had one good season. This is a guy who across a whole bunch of different teams, a whole bunch of different schemes has had success. And as the Packers are sort of looking to rebuild their defense and bring in a lot of different players, it's exciting to have a guy who's run different schemes in Tampa Bay, Cleveland, San Francisco, and at Boston College. Yeah, he'll be able to adapt to the players rather than the Joe Barry thing of trying to force every single player to play Joe Barry defense.
And only 44 years old, too. So this is a young guy who could, potentially for the next couple of seasons, if things work out, and that's your hope, help build up this defense from where they are now. Remember, there's 8 first-round picks on the Packers defense right now. It's a very envious position group to take over. Plus, when you combine it with the offense that they have, all of a sudden now you're looking at a dangerous team. And I want to clarify one thing, because people could be in the comments saying, oh, you guys are just sucking up to your Packers fan base. That's really not what's happening here. I was thrilled when I first saw it. I was like, Hafley, of course. Why are they doing that?
This nobody, right?
Yeah, no. I was happy when I first saw that. But the more I've looked into it, and the more we talked about it, I'm going, okay, sure, he is still a wild card. I don't want to make it sound like Jeff Hafley is a lock to go down as one of the best defensive coordinators in the league right off the bat. But when you look at the track record, you can't help but get a little excited if you were a Packer fan. And so I don't want anyone in the comment section here saying you guys are just sucking up, because I actually like the pick. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, there were guys they probably rather would have had, right? I think particularly Vajiro Evero out of Carolina.
I think he was the preferred candidate.
But once your top couple of options aren't available, I think there's nothing wrong with trying to take a swing on a younger guy rather than, if people are on the market as like an NFL defensive coordinator who just got fired or was fired a year ago, it's for a reason, right? It's because things didn't work out where they were. Bringing in a guy who's had success everywhere he's gone, you're giving him the first coordinator job, so there's a risk there. But you also haven't ever seen things blow up with him. So there's a lot of upside, too.
Hey, there's no one who's rooting more for Kirk Cousins or whoever our quarterback is next year to absolutely light up this pass defense. I would be thrilled. I'd love to see that. So don't get too mad with us about that. Last thing here, one of the reasons that Jeff Hafley is leaving Boston College, and Ziggy, you said it's a little surprising to see someone with a stable job at the highest level, essentially in college football, or at least a Power 5 job, to leave for the NFL here. One of the sources close to Hafley said he wants to go coach football again in a league that's about football.
That source is his agent.
His sources. All right. Keep your sources close to your chest, Ziggy. But when you think about that, what has college football turned into? If you're a head coach or even just an assistant coach there's NIL. There's recruiting. There's the transfer portal, which has become much bigger than it was ever before. College football now, if you're a coach, it's a full year-round grind. There's not a lot of time off. You have a couple weeks and that's it. Then you're out on the trail trying to recruit people. It's a different world from where we were, just 5 years ago or 10. If you go back 10, it's a completely different world. So for coaches like Jeff Hafley, who like coaching football, you don't get as much of that anymore. I think about Saban, Jim Harbaugh. These guys love coaching. I bet part of the reason that they retired and went to the NFL is because it's a real big grind now. It's a huge ask to be a college football coach. So now you get to take on this job with as I said before, a very promising Packer team. It makes sense to me why this move would be made.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, it's not, I understood and expected this to come from a coach who maybe wasn't as good at recruiting. What's interesting, and if you're interested in college football, concerning about Jeff Hafley leaving, is he was one of the best recruiters in the country. And he didn't get a chance to totally show that off at Boston College. But as you said, some of the best recruiting classes in Boston College history coming very early.
The three best.
Yeah, the three best came in his 3 years. Right. So this is a guy, that's how he got the job in part, was of what he was able to do at Ohio State, the guys he was able to bring in. So to see somebody like that, who spent a lot of time in college, who seemed to like it, who was really, really good at the part of the job, move on. I don't know. I do think there's something to be a little bit worried about the future of college football. And of course, now between the University of Tennessee suing the NCAA, all of these rules and laws are going to change and it's eventually going to settle. But you've been hearing for years that someone big in college football was going to move on. Head coaches, coordinators would start leaving, taking pay cuts to a third of their salary just to go to the NFL. This is the first time we've really seen that happen.
Yeah, there's been a couple other coaches who have made the move this offseason, and you might start seeing it more. It is a different world of college football from where we were just recently. But so with that said, we'll wrap this up here. The Packers go out and get Jeff Hafley, Boston College head coach, not one of the candidates that I saw anyone reporting on coming into this offseason.
I searched, you can do Google search to exclude recent results. I had them exclude results from today and search Jeff Hafley Packers. I couldn't find anything from before 2020.
No, I did a double take. I was like, is there another Jeff Hafley that I was unaware of? It didn't make any sense at first, but the more you dig into it, the better it sounds. So we'll have our work cut out for us in the NFC North. We'll thank our friend Sophia, who sat in on the live studio show, I say here, in the bedroom of Lake Tahoe. Sophia's boyfriend's a Packer fan, so hopefully we ease his concerns, because a lot of Packers fans are going to be worried about this. Hopefully hopefully you guys enjoyed this and got some useful information out of this short little podcast here. But we'll be back with a lot of content next week. I'll be back home. We'll be in studio breaking down 49ers Chiefs, a lot of off-season content. Ziggy and I are dying to get into some of these conversations around Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. What are the Bears going to do with that number one pick? Jack has the Steelers, Kenny Pickett. There's a decision to be made there. So we'll get to all of that, and we're excited to break it down this offseason. For Paul, for Ziggy, we'll be back very soon.
I didn't say this because I think it would be controversial, but you know what actually scares me the most about the Jeff Hafley hire?
What?
Is people have said everywhere he goes, the very first thing he does is go to data analysts and just try and get as much data as possible on the other teams in his league and how to sort of optimally run defenses. He spends a ton of time with those PFF guys and whatnot. And that
sounds like it's up your alley.
I like coaches who are interested in evidence, and he seems to be a coach who is interested in evidence. But that is, I don't know.
Yeah,
I am actually worried that this guy's going to be pretty good.
Sounds like Dan Campbell too. Your evidence-based coaches.
I mean, Dan Campbell, he makes the decisions that are in line with evidence, but he's made it very clear that's not why he makes those choices. He's talked about this actually. Yeah, well, so he said that it came from his time in 2009 with the Saints. And when Sean Payton,
that 2009
teams would pee their pants.
Oh, I actually think I agree with you on that. I do think that when I'm watching a game and it's 4th and 2 from the 50-yard line, I breathe a sigh of relief when they punt.
Yeah,
which does say something about it. So
I get rule. You should want to do what your opponent doesn't want you to do.
Yeah, no, I completely get where you're coming from most of the time.
No, I get it. It's sometimes the evidence leads you in places where you don't expect, but I don't know. I actually wonder if, I wonder if long-term this is I think Hafley might actually just be trying to launch himself into a better head coaching job in college.
100%. Yeah, this is a launching pad. it's a great launching pad too, because if the Packers are anything like, if he comes in and is a good defensive coordinator with the offense they have, I don't know if they'll be a legitimate Super Bowl. I mean, probably, but they'll be one of the better teams in the NFC. And if he does that for a year or two, from what they were to what they could become, with some success for the team as a whole, now you're talking about someone who, maybe could land a big time college job, maybe even gets a head coaching look. I mean, a lot of assistant coaches or defensive coordinators are still being hired. So,
yeah, I mean, I wonder increasingly if like the college head coaching jobs are going to be the landing spaces for defensive coordinators who are pretty good but can't move on to NFL head coaching jobs
because of the offensive coordinator market.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Mike Macdonald, because people are acting like he's getting hired for his defensive coordinating, but I actually don't think this is why.
It's tough. It's tough for defensive coordinators because the offensive coordinators now, there's so much allure to having a guy like Shanahan, like McVay, like a LaFleur, getting into that coaching tree. That's the dream for every single franchise right now. It seems that you wonder what's going to happen to the great defensive coordinators. DeMeco Ryans, there will be markets for him, but compared to the offensive coordinator market, it's a different world.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I mean, I think
should I throw this in at the end of the episode? I feel like this is a good conversation.
No, it's funny. Well, like a lot of the things that make head coaches good that I think go ignored is experience with management.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like, this is part of what makes Macdonald so interesting, I think, is he's been a lot of time with like Ravens management and sort of learning how they operate their team. So if you're a team like the Seahawks that's trying to transition sort of into a new operational structure, I think bringing in a guy who's seen how a really successful team like the Ravens do things can be super effective.
Culture setter. Yeah.
I mean, not just culture, but even just like what kinds of people should you be hiring for jobs? Who should be like,
no, it's important. That's a really underrated part of the job is setting the culture, bringing in the right people. Belichick was just bringing in his friends for a while. Didn't go well. LaFleur and Barry was basically, I know that wasn't their first option, but LaFleur and Barry were close friends. Sometimes it just doesn't work out when you do it that way. Now,
people forget, John Harbaugh, right? He made his bones as a special teams coordinator. And he does some of that stuff, but like that's not all that important. Andy Reid, right? He was an offensive line coach.
Yeah.
Like bringing in, Mike Tomlin. I mean, he was only a defensive coordinator for 1 year. So like you can bring in guys who aren't super competent. Like you don't need the best coordinators in the entire world. I actually think sometimes that's bad. What you need are guys who know how to run a team and run an organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I might add that in. I might add this in at the end.
Feel free to add it in. I think there's something interesting to this, but I think that's really why, here's what I'll say. And on the outside, the kinds of things that we can see when you're assessing coaching hires, whether it's at a coordinator position or a head coaching position, have very little to do with success on the job. It's a little better for coordinators. You can kind of look at their experience scheming. But even then, for these higher level jobs, so much of what you're doing is management, like making a culture. And it's impossible to know how that's going to go. How many people, when Robert Saleh got hired, said like the biggest thing he's going to be bringing besides a great defense is that like 49ers culture where everyone wants to play for him?
Yeah.
And then you look at the absolute disaster that's unfolded in New York. Like we just have no idea what's going on in the locker room ever.
It's a lot of times you just have to see what happens, which is no one wants to hear that.
What you want is in the same way you want an instant grade to like the head coaching hire or the draft pick or whatever. But the factors that determine success are largely just things we can't see from the outside.
That's a great point. I'll add this in at the end. So for everyone who stuck around, thanks for watching. This is we were not planning on including this in the show, but I thought it was a fun conversation. So
in case you wonder whether what you're seeing on the show is kind of just all of us talking about football like we sort of normally would with a little bit of structure, you see, that's actually kind of what we're doing. Yeah. No, and that we actually like to hire. So there you go. You get some behind the scenes. All right.